Okay, I'm ready.
Welcome, everybody, to Inside Boxing Daily on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. Inside Boxing Daily is brought to you by BetNow.eu, where when you go to BetNow.eu, use the promo code TRUTH50, and on your first initial deposit, you can get a 50% cashback bonus up to $1,000. Also, we're brought to you by the Retired Boxers Foundation with our friends Jackie Richardson and Alex Ramos. Make sure you check them out on Facebook, and Seat Giant. And make sure you go to Seat Giant and use the promo code TGT to get 5% off all your ticket purchases. I am your co-host for Inside Boxing Daily, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I would like to welcome to the show my co-host, Jeremiah Preisser.
What's up, man? What's up? Let's get this thing going, man.
All right, and we have a special guest. If you listen to our show, you'll hear his questions rather nightly, which we really appreciate, especially when he threw that Joe Louis Muhammad Ali at us, because that really stretched our show out. But help me welcome to the show, all the way from Cardiff, Wales, Hamed. How you doing, Hamed?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. How's it going? Yeah, it's good to be back on with you guys.
It's always good to have you on. We always appreciate when you ask questions. If anybody has any questions during the show, you can go to at Grueling Truth on Twitter, direct message us questions there, or you can do it right on Spreaker if you're listening to the show on Spreaker. All right, let's go ahead and start off. We got a couple title fights coming up tomorrow night. We're going to start off with, we'll start off with the DAZN card. I think it's a better card. We got Demetrius Andrade versus Selecki. What do you think here, Jeremiah? Because Selecki's a solid fighter.
Yeah, I think he is. I mean, I think he's proven his worth. I mean, he did have a tougher than expected outing in his last one against Gabriel Rosada, but I think that was his last fight. He was hurt in that fight. He had Rosada hurt in that fight. He had to manage. He had to settle for something a bit closer than he liked. But I've always thought that he was a damn good fighter. In fact, I mean, I had written a piece about him a while back, spotlighting him as a prospect before he fought Hugo Centeno Jr., and he ended up, putting on a pretty damn good performance in that fight. So, you couple with that with what he's been able to do against some of these other guys, namely Daniel Jacobs, and I think he's a rock-solid boxer. I mean, he's got fine skills. He understands the jab. His accuracy is pretty good. You can see that he had good amateur experience. I mean, I like what I see out of the guy. I mean, he just doesn't have an X factor. He doesn't have bone-crushing power. He doesn't have blinding hand speed. He's not that kind of guy. He's just pretty solid at just about everything. And I think he has a decent chance at an upset here. I mean, Demetrius Andrade was looked at highly. I mean, he was a good amateur. He was an Olympian. We don't get a lot of good, except for the last Olympics, we haven't really had a good amateur system since, I don't even think we've had a gold medalist since, barring Clarissa Shields, barring the women's.
I would say it's
right?
been pretty much downhill since about 1988 or 1992 in the United States.
I'm trying to think of the last gold medalist, and I think it was Andre Ward in 2004. That tells you just how far the ship has sunk since then. But, Andrade, there was a lot of hope for him coming out of the amateur ranks. He was a good boxer, and, ever since then, he's just been disappointing. And it's not necessarily that he's not a skilled guy, but he's just had issues. He hasn't been active. He struggled with guys like Jack Colkay. He got knocked down against Vanes Martirosyan. He's a good fighter. I expect him to earn a decision here. I just think with his inactivity, I know he's been a bit more active lately, but it's just when you get guys like that, he kind of reminds me of Andre Dirrell, somebody who looks very talented, but because he's so inactive and, just doesn't feel like he's dedicated himself to the sport, he just kind of has that feel like something's about to happen, like he's about to get knocked off. I don't expect Solecki to make it happen, but I wouldn't be surprised if it does.
Yeah, and when I look at this, Hamed, the thing that stands out to me is you talked, Jeremiah, about Jack Colque. Selecki had a lot easier time of Colque than Andrade did, Hamed. I think he's a live dog here.
I also seen that Solecki gave Derevchenko a tough fight, so I did only find that out recently that Solecki did a pretty good job. Was it Colque? I meant Colque. Derevchenko did a good job on.
Yeah, he handled Colque much easier than what Andrade did.
And Derevchenko, yeah, that's what I meant. So that shows that he probably is better than some people think, but I've only seen him once live in action and against Jacobs, and I was impressed. I do think he's a live dog, because the thing with Andrade is I think he's been so inactive and the level of opposition has been so poor. It's actually hard to tell what he's lost or what he's still got since I think his last probably big fight or fight I thought he was around about when I think before he switched promotion companies was probably against, probably go back 2016. I think it was Willie Nelson, but
yeah,
he was meant to fight Billy Joe Saunders, so I think this could be probably his sternest test since about 2016, and that is quite a while back.
Yeah, and to tell you the truth, if you go to bet now, right now, you can get almost 6-1 odds against Selecki, Jeremiah. I think if I was going to bet this fight, I think I'd go with them he's like plus 550 right now.
Well, yeah, and actually, if you look at what kind of year it's been, there's actually been a good number of upsets that have happened, surprisingly. I think to our delight, actually, because when you're constantly putting on, fights that look like mismatches on paper, a lot of us find ourselves rooting for the underdog even harder. So I don't think that's bad. I mean, I think it might be worth betting a little bit on. Selecki, again, he, feels like one of those things that Demetrius Andrade will probably start well. His talent will kind of show through. Selecki will, try to track him down and find his timing and distance. And, Andrade will probably take the first, 4 rounds or so. Afterwards is when I think it's going to be damn interesting, because I do think Selecki has the gear, to find him if he can get his distance down, if he can cut off the ring. I mean, that's going to be the hardest part against somebody like Demetrius Andrade. But, yeah, I think he's a live dog, and I think he could score the upset here. And I actually wouldn't mind it. Again, it's not that I have anything against Demetrius Andrade, but, with all the chitter-chatter that's been going on, especially with Canelo Alvarez lately and just the middleweight division, I just think it would be kind of funny to see a wrench thrown in the whole thing, kind of like we saw with Andy Ruiz and Anthony Joshua. I mean, it just... when we're not like with Demetrius Andrade, I do think he's a good fighter, but when these guys are able to get alphabet soup titles without beating anybody even ranked inside the top 10, it just doesn't feel like a proper way of doing things to me. And again, it's not that I have anything against Andrade. It's just I wouldn't mind seeing him upset.
All right. I wouldn't either. I would like to see them both get beat. Just shut up all the idiots on there. There's a lot of dumb people in social media.
I want to see with Andrade, though, it is slightly different, because he was meant to fight Billy Joe Saunders, who was a respectable middleweight champion at the time. I know he had just the one belt, but it seemed as the guy who was I think it was either the top 3 along with Canelo and Golovkin, or was it top 4, whatever, with Jacobs. But it wasn't Andrade's fault what happened, but he has still got a belt. The only thing now is about actually fighting, hopefully getting a big fight. I don't know if it'll happen. What we're hearing with Canelo, but if he can get a fight with Golovkin, or I don't know why he isn't calling out Charlo, who's also fighting this weekend.
I don't know why him and Charlo don't call out each other, because then they could make one of them big enough to maybe be able to ask for that fight.
And that's a good option as well. Like Charlo, I think what's happened with the WBC, he can look at other routes as well. And for Andrade, they'll actually give him more exposure and more credit if you beat someone like Charlo.
Yeah, and then you talk about Charlo. Jamal Charlo faces Brandon Adams this week. This is the thing that stands out to me. Andrade is fighting Selecki. Selecki's a good fighter. Selecki's got a chance to pull the upset. I don't see it with Brandon Adams here, Jeremiah, because he's made it to the finals of a couple Boxino tournaments. He won a contender tournament that basically nobody watched. Adams is going to do his best. He was a guest on the Ringside Boxing show a couple weeks ago. But I think Charlo takes him out inside of 5 rounds.
Yeah, I don't think Adams has a lot for him. I mean, I do think Adams is a fun guy to watch. He does typically go out and get it. I mean, like you said, he's been on ESPN a few times. I think he ended up losing the final. I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, he did.
How?
I think.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember.
Did Willie Monroe beat him pretty easily too?
Yeah, I think that's what it was. But yeah, then
Monroe, yeah.
Yeah, and then he ended up winning the contender series, and actually he beat Yevgen Kitrov, who I thought was going to be pretty good. I mean, Adams has some pop. He is a fun fighter. He's aggressive. Technically he's pretty good. Nothing special. But he just lacks some refinement. And Charlo, say what you want about the guy, I think he's got some refinement. I mean, Ronnie Shields really had both the Charlos learn the basics, master the basics, and they're very good at those. I mean, I think they both have excellent jabs. Jamal seems to have more power. He's beaten the better opposition as well. I mean, just the fact that he knocked Julian Williams out actually looks a lot better on paper now. And to Williams' credit, he was actually neck and neck with Charlo at the time too. But it was a high-speed chess match. It was entertaining.
Yeah, Williams is a good fighter too.
Exactly. I mean, he just showed it not that long ago. So to me, Adams he doesn't have the ability to hang with Charlo here. I'm just hoping for his sake that he just goes and he tries to get it. Don't sit there and try to box with him at distance. Just make the most of your opportunity and try to knock Charlo out.
Yeah, and the other thing about Charlo that stands out to me, and I'll go ahead and direct this at Hamed, and you can give us your opinion, but I respect Hamed's opinion, so I don't imagine he thinks Brandon Adams has much of a chance here, but does it bother you the way Charlo struggled with Korobov his last outing?
Ooh, that's a good point. I've always said Korobov was underrated, and I think people just start judging him on what happened with Andy Lee.
He's up there in age too, though.
Oh, yeah, at the time he fought him, yeah, that was a struggle. But if you look at him stylistically, I think Korobov is a very good fighter. It's just when he fought him, he also was meant to fight. He was meant to fight someone else. I can't remember. I think it might have been Willie Monroe, and Korobov was a late replacement, so that kind of looked bad for Charlo to struggle. I thought Korobov did enough to. I think maybe a draw would probably be. I think right at the
not to
live.
Larry Hazard Jr. He had it like 118 to 109.
I thought he won actually live, but I think there was a round or two which I think Charlo might have won and did enough to maybe get a draw with that rally in the last round. But I'll say this with Brandon Adams, I do think he's a better fighter than some people are thinking. I watched the whole of the Contender Series, as I've watched, I think, pretty much all the Contender Series, and I thought he beat some very good fighters. I think Eric Walker was a very good fighter, and he surprised me. He did beat him. I think he might have cut him, but that was a good win. The win against, I can't pronounce his name. I think it's Kurtashov, the one Jeremiah said who was the favorite. That was a good win as well. But I'll say this, Charlo should win, but he's a much better opponent than who the other Charlo fought last weekend, Kota, and I think Brandon Adams, unless something happens to him overnight, I think he's a much better opponent than Steve Rolls as well. And I'd rather have seen Golovkin fought Brandon Adams, because I heard they tried, the offer they gave Adams, he was saying on, I think, Steve Kim's podcast, was like not much money, and that would have been, I think, a better fight than Steve Rolls, although I don't think Steve Rolls is as bad as some people think. But I will be really surprised if this ends in a couple of rounds. I think Adams, I was looking at his record as well. The only other glitch on his record was a defeat to John Thompson, who was also in the contender. And I think he went into it why that happened. I think he had to cut off a lot of weight. So Willie Monroe is pretty much the only guy I've heard that's beaten him fair and square or without any reasoning. And I do think Willie Monroe is probably not that bad of a fighter.
Yeah. And do you want to address the social media buzz about how Canelo and Triple G are ducking Andrade and Charlo, Jeremiah?
Yeah, sure. Well, I did want to say, too, that I did see the John Thompson fight against Brandon Adams. And Thompson, maybe it was weight. Maybe he was struggling with it. It's always hard to say, I mean, because a lot of guys do have excuses when they lost. And I remember John Thompson. He was actually a tall guy, real rangy. And it was surprisingly good, in my opinion. But, yeah, I mean, here's the thing is, you're getting a lot of people on social media who are saying that Demetrius Andrade and Jermall Charlo are being avoided, and it's just growing tiresome because it's just a lot of double standards that are going on, in my opinion. Because, like for instance, the WBC crowning Canelo Alvarez the franchise champion. In fact, they had already said something like that months and months ago. They said he was franchise champion, but they did not make it as if it was a brand new title itself. Instead, they were saying he was a representative of the WBC, and in that way he was a franchise champion. So months ago they had kind of indicated what was going on, but we didn't realize that they were going to give him a brand new status and title for it. So what has essentially happened is almost a repeat of the Gennady Golovkin situation for the WBA, where many, many years ago, Golovkin, I think this was back in, I can't remember the exact date, but Golovkin became the number one contender for Felix Sturm's WBA belt and the WBA. And so in a way, this is very similar because Felix Sturm was the golden boy in Germany. He had just signed a big TV contract. And, they allowed him to become the quote-unquote super champion, and they gave Golovkin the regular belt, even though they still call it a world title. And so now we're seeing something very similar, though, of course, Alvarez is getting flack for it. Golovkin is getting an odd amount of flack for it. And it all just strikes me as a bit weird because these things are just – the outrage is just not being applied it's not being applied equally across the board, and it just grows a bit irritating, right? Demetrius Andrade is a good fighter. I will give him that. He has a paper belt, right? I mean, even Canelo Alvarez has acknowledged that he wants to fight Demetrius Andrade in the future, but I don't see this brand new status of Canelo Alvarez's. I don't see it as a means for him to duck Jermall Charlo or Demetrius Andrade, because first off, he's beaten better fighters than both of them. Okay, Golovkin has proven more than either one of them. Arislandi Lara, to me, is a better southpaw than Demetrius Andrade is. And for me, this is what it strikes me as. It strikes me as basically letting Canelo Alvarez have more free reign over his future. So if he wants to, so instead of holding him to the same rules, because this franchise champion actually comes with its own statutes, this allows Alvarez to kind of do as he pleases, where he can jump up to 168 and, fight Callum Smith and not be docked. Maybe I don't know what the rules are, but my guess is he doesn't really have to honor his mandatories like he used to. If he potentially goes up and fights Sergey Kovalev, he can do that and be fine. I mean, to me, it just sounds like he's getting more free reign over his career. I really don't think Charlo and Andrade are that scary enough to duck. After all, Alvarez just beat Daniel Jacobs, who I think is also better than either one of these guys. So to me, it's not so much about ducking. And to me, I think the outrage should be directed at the WBC and Golden Boy and those people. I don't think Alvarez is afraid of anybody. I just think they're kissing his ass.
All right. My question also is this. And Hamed, maybe you know more about this than I do, but where would Kovalev fight Canelo out weight-wise? Would it be 175? Would it be a catch weight, or would it be 168?
I read it's 170, but if that fight happens below 175, then I can't give Canelo credit. Because to me, Canelo fighting Kovalev, this region of Kovalev, the only way, I know it's a big jump from 160, but the only way I could give him credit is if he beats him as his weight class. Because Kovalev, he's a damn good fighter at 175, but if you look at the facts, he has been knocked out, whether we agree or not. Was it twice? I think one of them was a very suspect stoppage.
Well, you had the Ward one where he got repeatedly hit in the balls.
Yeah. And with the Alvarez one, I think that was a very bad knockout. And even though he beat Alvarez in the rematch, I think that was just based on skill. I think he's just a really talented and skillful boxer, but his body language, the way his punch resistance looks to me, he's not the same guy. So if Canelo brings him down to 170 and he peppers that body and knocks him out, then I think the weight will matter. Even though Canelo's jumping up from 160, well, he's fought at 168, so that shows he's already not as small as I think some people are saying. But even though he's jumping up from his last fight to what will be 10 pounds, I still think I'd give more credit if he's at 175.
All right, we have a message from Chuck on Twitter. He says, I don't know. I can see Canelo winning it. Why? Kovalev's kryptonite is body shots, Jeremiah. Something a shorter Canelo can take advantage of.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can see it. I mean, I've seen that idea passed around a little while on social media. And again, for me, it kind of depends on the weight. I mean, Kovalev, to me, looks like he's pretty thinned out at 175. I mean, when he comes into the fight, his face looks sucked into me. I don't know. Kovalev, to me, just looks like he's pretty thin at this age and at 175. So if he entertains the idea of going down to 170, I mean, I can understand why he would. I mean, after all, that's a huge payday. I mean, why wouldn't you, right? These guys are prize fighters. But that's what it. I don't know. I have to see what weight it is before I start making some sort of prediction.
Yeah. At 175, I would favor Kovalev. At 170, I would favor Canelo.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, it might be one of those Chad Dawson, Andre Ward things where he just can't wear the weight well. Again, I don't think he could because, I mean, he's 2 pounds shy of super middleweight at that point. And I don't know if he's ever fought at that weight. I'd have to go back and look at his career, hop on BoxRec and, see if he's ever been that thin. But he's just been at 175 for so long, and I've even heard him entertain the idea of moving up in the past. So if it's at 170, I could see, Canelo Alvarez bobbing and weaving his way inside and banging the body. But I really think 175, I mean, these guys come into the ring – like what, 180, 185, 190,
I guarantee
190?
you that 170 will probably have a rehydration clause and he can't be more than 175.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. If I was Kovalev, I wouldn't agree to those terms. Again, I understand the big payday is
you would.
harder.
You would agree to it as soon as you saw like the $15 million written into the contract. Yes, you would. Don't you tell me you wouldn't.
Not if I was Kovalev. No, I wouldn't. Nope. Not if I was Kovalev.
What if you're you?
No. Well, yeah, of course, if I'm me. I mean, hell. Yeah, that's an entirely different story. But that's my thing is if it's at 175, I'm favoring Kovalev. I know he's obviously past his best. He's no longer in his prime. But he's a very sharp jabber. And if there's anything – I mean, I think Golovkin is a better boxer than Kovalev is as well. Kovalev is a bit more predictable than Golovkin as well. To really get Alvarez going, you gotta mix it up in the inside a little bit. I mean, I can see stylistically how someone could favor Alvarez, but at 175, to me, Kovalev just seems like he'd be a bit too big, a bit too long. Because Canelo, yeah, he's a skilled guy, and I would probably favor him just over nearly anyone at 168. But he's not that tall of a guy either. And Kovalev, to me, is very rangy. He's good at keeping distance. I still think he's arguably the biggest puncher in the sport, he's definitely near there. So I'm favoring him at 175, 170. Yeah, I can see Alvarez, but I just don't know.
I think.
Go ahead.
Sorry to cut you off. I'm going to respectfully disagree because I think Canelo is a heavy favorite, and if I was to put money on it, I would put a lot of money on Canelo. Based on, I've seen a lot of these guys' fights, and to me, Kovalev, although he did well in the first fight with Ward, there's a difference between fighting on the inside and locking someone up. He locked up Ward a lot on the inside in the first fight, and that was very impressive. But I don't think he can fight on the inside like Ward. I know it's a bit of wrestling and some of it is a bit illegal. With one hand, maybe you can't say it's legal, but to me, I don't see how Kovalev will be able to keep him off, because I think the jab is still good, but I don't think he's what he was before that first Ward fight. I think Kovalev might have been one of, if not the best, probably pound for pound boxer, one of the best boxers in the game. But mentally, I think the body language is not the same. He's still a very good fighter, and what would be worrying is how Canelo lands those body shots, and against Kovalev, who really doesn't like it to the body. I've seen some top fighters who don't like it, but Kovalev is someone who's very suspect to the body, and to me, it'll become a battle of who could implement the game plan. And I just think Canelo would get on the inside, and he could probably stop him with a body shot. But Kovalev's best chance is that fight has to happen at 175, and he'll have to box accordingly to his game plan, because what John David Jackson said was very worrying. The fact that he hurt him to the body. All right. And another thing is with Kovalev.
Did you just miss your plane, Hamed?
No, I thought
Okay,
that was.
go ahead.
No, my house is being raided by ATF. My house is being raided.
Geez,
So
that's the third
let's go.
time this summer.
Yeah, I gotta let you guys go.
Go ahead.
So even though Kovalev will have size and height advantage, but even though Danny Jacobs is not nowhere near on the level of Kovalev, I think we've seen Canelo. He's overcome size. I don't think that's the main thing. I think the jab is the main thing. But to me, for Canelo, it's going to be simple. Just get on the inside and pepper that body. And I've never seen someone so, what's the word, effective with the body right now in the game. And
Yeah.
I've never seen someone so vulnerable in
But
Kovalev.
how about this, though, Hamed? My question is this. The only time Canelo's fought above 160 was 168, and it was against Rocky Fielding. I think if you put this fight at 170 or less, I agree with you. I think at 175, though, it could be different because it's a huge jump for a guy that was a welterweight.
Did you say above 160 or 168?
168. I think if it's 170 or below, I mean, I don't count the competition he's fought is not that great at the higher weights yet, except for
I get what you're saying, but the thing is, I'll give Canelo full credit. Even though I'm predicting him to win, I think this is a much more dangerous and risky fight than Golovkin in the third fight. Because I think Golovkin is on the decline, and he doesn't have the advantages that Kovalev would have in size and height and whatever reach. But it's a very dangerous fight. The thing I think Callum Smith, even though I think this is more to do with styles make fights, Callum Smith would probably be more of a dangerous fight to me, not based on Callum Smith being more skillful than Kovalev. It's just, I think he's in his prime. He's never lost. And to me, I think he knows how to keep his range with Kovalev. Although he's a very good boxer on the outside, I have seen a lot of times he can get drawn into a fight and dragged onto the inside, and I think Canelo is very effective, but I don't think weight will be the big reason. I think it'll come down to skill, but I do see why so many people are picking Kovalev. The thing is, though, I think if this fight happens, I think you can't say Canelo's ducking guys like Charlo, Andrade, and even Golovkin.
No, he's ducking Golovkin if he doesn't fight him. And this is my theory on this. No, seriously. Kovalev, as we just talked, has a tendency to tap out. I think and me and Jeremiah have talked about this, I think that Canelo knows if he fights Triple G, he's going to have to go through hell to win the fight, no matter whether Triple G's old or not. And against Kovalev, if that fight goes into an area where people are going through hell, Kovalev's shown that he can be beaten like that. Golovkin is a guy that I think is going to bring it no matter what. And Canelo's going to know he's been in a fight when that's over. I think that if he fights Kovalev, especially at 170, put it like this: there's more money to be made fighting Triple G than there is to fight Kovalev. So why are you going to fight Kovalev? You're going to fight Kovalev because you think he's an easier mark. You saw him get knocked out a couple fights ago, and if you're Canelo, you hit Triple G with everything you had, and didn't even really dent him. Triple G didn't dent him either. But that second fight is the fight where I gained a new appreciation for Canelo because he stood there and fought. I thought that Triple G won the fight, but I thought it was extremely close. And I think that he is ducking him. I think if he doesn't fight Triple G, you know.
Yeah. Can I say, I don't want to, I'll let Jeremiah get in, but to me, I think Canelo, from the first fight to the second fight, I thought the rematch was a draw live. But on rewatch, I gave Canelo 7 rounds. I could see the argument. I don't think it was a robbery, but
no, it was
to
close.
To me, Golovkin looked old in that rematch, even though he did well with the jab and on the back foot. And I think, I'll say this, because this is a bit of a tricky area. I could see if Canelo fights Golovkin later than September, then I think I can't give him much credit, because Golovkin is 36.
But
He's getting really old.
This is where I'm going with this. I think that's what's happening here. I think he fights Kovalev.
I'm kind of sick of seeing,
yeah,
after seeing it twice.
Yeah, I could see him even fighting Callum Smith or somebody else in December, and then next May fight Triple G. And then Triple G's completely probably shot by then. And, you know, he still cashes out. He still gets the money for that fight. But it's a lot easier fight for him. I think that's what he's doing. And I don't think this is necessarily Canelo doing it. But we know Oscar De La Hoya is pulling the strings. And Canelo will do what he's told. So I think this is where it's going. I don't think we see a third Triple G fight until May.
I get what you're saying. I got a question. I think any of you could jump in. Would you give Canelo more credit if he... What's the word? I don't know about knocking Triple G out, but say Triple G retires or is pulled out somehow and say he looks really old. Or would you give him more credit for, say, making Kovalev quit? I don't think he quit against Ward, but some people do.
I don't think he quit against Ward either. I think people overrate that. But to me, I pretty much don't give Canelo much credit for either one of the fights because the fight should have happened 3 or 4 years ago. And if they happened 3 or 4 years ago, I think Golovkin knocks him out.
No, but with the Kovalev comparison.
Oh, with the comparison?
No, because that's a big jump from him.
But the thing is this, we don't know how big a jump it's going to be, number one. And number two, we don't know what Triple G is going to look like in September. I would just like to see the fight in September because I think there's a better chance of it being competitive.
Yeah, okay. So here's where I'm going to go with this is that I don't think I know yet because it hasn't played itself out. I mean, the reason I say I can't give him credit, one way or the other, and I would give him credit regardless, of who he beats. But here's my thing: is I don't really know because if he gets Sergey Kovalev at 170 and Kovalev just looks like a skeleton, he has no stamina, I'm going to give him less credit for that than the third Golovkin fight, which he probably should have taken. Golovkin to me is a better fighter than Kovalev is. I mean, even at this point, he is still a better fighter than Kovalev is. So, when you talk about size isn't necessarily a big factor, I think that is kind of actually, I think it is a factor here because, when we talk about Andre Ward, I actually think Golovkin might have done better against Andre Ward than Sergey Kovalev just because I think his jab is arguably better, and I think his skills are he's just better rounded. But I just don't know which one he would get credit for more because if he fights Kovalev at 175, I think that's fair. If he fights him at 175, again, and he just looks drawn and weak. I have to wait until it plays itself out until there's context.
The third fight should have happened in May, anyways.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and this is my thing, too, is we talk about this a lot on the show, Mike, is that perception really does affect the way things ultimately end up. I mean, if before Canelo Alvarez fought Daniel Jacobs, I actually favored Golovkin to probably stop, or I mean, for Alvarez to probably stop Golovkin. But seeing as he kind of let Daniel Jacobs off the hook and didn't really put enough pressure on him at the end there, I'm not really sure right now. But right now, it's just, to me, it's just too hard to say. I don't know. I mean, Golovkin at 37 still looks pretty damn good for his age, but he's been past his best for quite a few years now. I don't know. I just have to wait and see how it plays out before, I know how to apply that credit.
Jeremiah, I think I do disagree. I do get where you're coming from with Golovkin and Kovalev. To me, I think Kovalev might have been a better boxer. We're definitely, I think, hit harder because the way I put it, Golovkin, even if you think he was slightly past his prime, one of his first biggest fights or toughest tests was with Danny Jacobs. He won. I don't think it was much in it. I think the knockdown and maybe 12th round didn't, for me, enough for Golovkin to win that fight. But I know there was some size disadvantage, but I wasn't too impressed with Golovkin. With Kovalev, I know this is a bit of a different comparison because he was fighting someone moving up, and even though I don't think Ward was that small, but I was very impressed with Kovalev, how he outboxed Ward, who was perceived as the boxer. Now, I know we've never seen Golovkin and Ward ever fight, but I do think a lot more people would favour Ward, and Ward would probably have fouled his way or wrestled his way to some sort of ugly decision. I don't think he would ever knock Golovkin out, but I don't think that fight would be competitive. With Kovalev, Ward found it hard to get past the jab. He had trouble getting away from his power punches, and Kovalev put him down as well. I think Kovalev might have been a better boxer, definitely hit harder. I think the boxing one is a bit debatable. I could see how people think Triple G might have been a better boxer because I think stamina and stuff like that do come into question, and Kovalev has shown he can be folded and he can be hurt, and he's been knocked out and knocked down numerous times, and he's gassed in a lot of fights as well. But I do think that one thing I do have to say that is probably certain is Kovalev does probably hit much harder.
Well, yeah, he's also a light heavyweight, though. And the other thing is this. If you just compare division for division and what they do, you still got Golovkin at 40 fights with 35 knockouts.
He's killed someone in the ring, so that shows it's not just division. He's actually, I think he's got a body on his record, and he's actually put a lot of people to sleep. I think Golovkin is a more of accumulation, but one-punch power, I think Kovalev does.
How about
in my opinion?
Maybe that perception changes completely if Canelo fights Golovkin when he should have in 2014 or 15.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
So, I mean, when you look at this, everybody got folded and put to sleep, as you young kids say. We just used to knock a motherfucker out when I was your age. But let's see. But when you look at this, I don't see too many people going the distance with Golovkin either in his prime, and he's also, how old is he now, Jeremiah? 37 years old. So
yeah, I think he turned 37 in April, I believe it was.
Yeah, and I think that he's looked like he's been slowing down ever since probably the David Lemieux fight to me.
Yeah, well, I don't know, man. It's tough for me to pinpoint exactly when he looks like he started fading. But again, I would encourage people to go watch his fights in Germany when he was, an up-and-comer there, and he was fighting guys like Ian Gardner and whatnot. I think Gardner was one of the few guys who went the distance with him back then. But I don't know. To me, he looked like he started slowing down. He wasn't as fluid. Pretty early in his start in America, but. My thing is this: I do think that Kovalev is the bigger hitter than Golovkin. I mean, I've made.
There's no doubt he is, but there's also no doubt Golovkin takes a punch better. That can even that out.
Yeah, that's not even a question. Kovalev, chin and body has been very suspect.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, and that's my thing too. Is I do think you could say that Kovalev is the better boxer. I think if you're talking about in terms of more pure boxing, I do think if you're using lateral movements, you're sticking to the jab, 1-2s. Yeah, I think Kovalev is the superior operator there. But I just don't think there's much difference between Kovalev's jab and Golovkin's jab. In fact, I think Golovkin's jab, pound for pound, is better than Kovalev's jab was. I think it's more versatile. Again, and I understand if you argue the other way, but my thing with Andre Ward is, he probably could rough him up, but Kovalev, you talk about the downfall of him not being able to, fight on the inside that well. Golovkin doesn't have that issue. I mean, Kovalev has better length. He's pretty sharp with his 1-2s. I think Golovkin is better rounded, and plus he's got the jab. But I mean, that's the thing, though. I mean, we're talking about.
I agree with that.
And we can't argue Kovalev. I mean, we know how good Kovalev is just because we all think he beat Andre Ward.
And Hopkins,
right?
Even though Hopkins was old, that was a pretty good performance.
I'm not real impressed by anything Bernard Hopkins has really ever done. I find him boring. Marvin Hagler would have folded his ass
like a picnic table. No, but
he'd have knocked that motherfucker out. But yeah, he would have too.
No, but I mean, I actually think it's interesting, when you put it into context for both Golovkin and Kovalev, because I have talked about this on other shows, and I think it's a travesty actually that a lot of these Eastern European guys, we're only seeing them when they're in their 30s or very close to it, and physically. We could not, it's possible that we missed the best years of these guys' career. I mean, had Golovkin, been a ranked contender in 2008, 2009, I mean, imagine what he may have done then. Kovalev really, getting his best fights in his 30s. I mean, I don't even know if we saw the best of Kovalev. I mean, I don't know. That's just kind of my thing.
That's probably due to his amateur background. Some of them can pro elite.
No, it's true. No, I've pointed that out too, that it is due to their amateur background. They're getting late starts in the pros. But still, I mean, what I'm saying is, had these guys, won one gold medal or, whatever it may have been, like Sergei I think Deverenchenko won a silver, or I can't remember. But had these guys gone to one Olympic Games and then gone into the pros, I think we'd be seeing better fighters. I think we'd be seeing a lot of these guys, and I think we'd hold a higher opinion of them because, again, it's like Andre Ward arguably beats, or, he's fighting him at, 34, 35? I mean, this is the thing when you look at history is that, like with a guy like Golovkin, you really don't talk about aggressors still hanging around at 34 years old fighting the top guys in the division. I mean, usually their time has come and gone.
Yeah, that's the same. That's the same with Pacquiao as well. It is rare. I think some of them are unique. I do get the argument to Triple G because he was a professional a lot longer than Kovalev, and he actually was kind of shelled out. And I've heard your point on the thing what happened with the Felix Sturm point. I do agree with that. He was ducked, and the way he was promoted is horribly in Germany. But as of late, I've kind of think that K2 and Tom Loeffler, I don't think they've done the best job. I think they just kind of become too dependent on Canelo, because I think he can fight other guys, and I rather would. We've seen the fight twice now. I don't think there's any cry for a third fight. I wouldn't mind seeing it, but I don't mind seeing him fight guys like Charlo and Andrade if he can't get that third fight, because otherwise I think his time on his his peak years are gone, and I think he's just going to get faded even quicker.
Yeah, all right, let's go ahead and let's transition, because there's a couple things Hamed wanted to talk about. One of them is pay-per-view, which Hamed is not a big fan of. Especially at 4 in the morning, right, Hamed?
Yeah, the thing a lot of people always talk about in America, that the price rate, but we get a lot more pay-per-views here. And we're getting, in December we got 2 pay-per-views on the same night from rival promoters. I don't think that's ever happened in America.
Oh, I think it has.
Has it?
Yeah, I think it has.
2 big fights?
It's been a while back, but hell, back in probably late 90s to mid 2000s. Hell, there was damn near a pay-per-view card every week. With Jeremiah, I didn't know he's too young. This is where I need John Einreinhofer. But go ahead.
There was a there was a card on when Sergio Martinez fought Chavez, but I don't think Canelo and Josecito Lopez was pay-per-view. So I can't remember when there's been actually
Well, I'm
two
talking about probably
pay-per-views.
more like late 90s, early 2000s. Stuff you youngerns wouldn't understand.
Oh, yeah. Oh, so it might have happened, but with America, there's a lot more fights in there, and there's a lot more boxing going on. When the UK is a little island, and to me, it's
Yeah.
just the pay-per-view has gone out of control. Now you got Thurman and Pacquiao on pay-per-view at 4 in the morning, which isn't the worst fight. I think it's a fight I wouldn't mind paying for if it was prime time
You got
in
to
the
make sure you
country.
don't fall asleep after you pay for it.
That's the bad thing as well. And then you got also a pay-per-view before that with Dillian White and Oscar Rivas, which I really don't think is a pay-per-view. It's not a bad card. I think you got 3 heavyweight title fights, but it's kind of bad to ask people to pay for 2 pay-per-views. Once on 2 rival shows at the same time, and now 2 on the same day. I know they're only £20 each or whatever. Or is it $40 a pay-per-view? But that's not good luck, because on top of this, the other thing is we don't get a DAZN ESPN Plus, which is only costs about $15 a month, which has very good content. Over here, you have Sky Sports, which is, I think, probably the main company, but entity for sports, but the boxing is very thin. Anything half decent is now on pay-per-view, with Dillian White even becoming a pay-per-view star, and then you got BT doing pay-per-views, TV doing pay-per-views, and Box Nation has kind of fallen off. So it's become not really you're not getting any value with your subscription base. And the thing is, the subscription channels like BT Sports and Sky Sports are quite much more expensive, and it's quite hard actually if I'm thinking about if someone was paying for these events, because it's about £40 or £50 I think a month, maybe around about there. And then on top, you're getting a pay-per-view at least once every other month, and now is coming to 2 or 3 pay-per-views a month, and that's a lot of money. Like, I don't think it's the same in America. Like, I don't know how people. I put a tweet out complain about the Zone and ESPN Plus, because the content you're getting on there is worth it. Over here, the content is very bad, and I think the only decent or very good fight we had here was probably on ITV, which was Spence and Mikey Garcia, but that was about 4 or 5 in the morning. So I think what's happening here on pay-per-view and with TV companies is a lot worse than in America.
Yeah, I don't know how anybody, and I've never complained about ESPN Plus or DAZN. Other people do that on our show, because I really, I really don't have a problem with it as long as you're giving me something worth watching. And DAZN has. ESPN Plus hasn't given a lot of great stuff, but it's only $4.99.
$5, yeah.
Yeah,
But
if
it's
I'm gonna
not.
bitch about $5,
But it's not.
what is it then?
Well, I mean, isn't an ESPN subscription, in there as well?
No, it's
Well, that comes
$4.99
with
for
cable.
ESPN Plus. That ESPN subscription's free. The only thing you pay for is the ESPN Plus, which I also get rugby. And I like rugby, but I know what Hamed's saying, because you got to watch that shit at 2:30 in the morning over here. Because I'll be looking at
exactly.
it, the All Blacks are playing South Africa, and I'm thinking, I might watch that. And then I look at it, it says 3:30. I say, yeah, I'm going to watch that. And then it says AM, and I'm like, I'm probably not going to see that.
But with monthly subscriptions, at least you're getting something monthly. With pay-per-views, I've calculated there was about 20 to 22 pay-per-views from around about the time when Joshua, I think it was for Charles Martin. That's when the pay-per-views once Anthony Joshua become a pay-per-view star, it's just become all hectic. Now it's too many pay-per-views, but when you keep adding £20, £20, it comes up to, I think, close to about £400-500 in a year. That's a lot of money. When I don't know how anyone could pay for that.
Fuck that.
For just
Watch your language.
that's why a lot of
Jeremiah.
people are streaming.
Jeremiah, we're not supposed to curse on the show.
I know.
I hate
I know, man. I'm
reprimand you
sorry.
like that in front of everybody, but
I know. I'm gonna have to call John. John's gonna have to do some legal work for me here soon. But man, it sucks. I mean, well, the thing about it, the American perception is that we do get some good content, built in, like ESPN Plus. You can go back and watch Top Ranks collection. That's a plus. DAZN, I think, even though the presentation isn't that, it's not great, but it's not bad. I mean, they do have some stream issues, but when you compare it to some of the other things, it's quite good. But I'm Team Stream all the way. I just unless you really get something that's worth paying for. I haven't paid for a pay-per-view since actually Alvarez Golovkin 2, and the only reason I paid for it is because my brother and my dad, paid for a third of it. I don't think much of it is worth it. Even here, I know it seems like we get more perks here, and that's fine. I just don't like it. For me, it's more of a protest against what's actually going on. It's like until you guys start putting on fights that I really want to see, stuff that's like 50-50. And for me, it's another thing too, is just, what was it, a few days ago, I think it was during this week, it was the anniversary of Keith Thurman versus Sean Porter, and that was on network television. So you can give me that stuff on network television. I don't have to shell out any money, and then you want to put on Garcia, Crawford, Khan, and all these other fights, and you expect me to shell out money for them. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to me. And so I'm going to continue to stream until they actually get their act together and put on fights that we want to see. I mean, if they eventually get to Spence Crawford, I'll probably shell out some money for that. But it's really got to be worth it for me, because it just doesn't make sense. I mean, again, if I can watch Thurman Garcia, Thurman Porter, which were both damn good fights, and millions saw those bouts, I can't be forced to pay for Pacquiao Thurman or any of these other bouts.
All right, let's go ahead and transition again. I know, Hamed, you wanted to talk a little bit about the Rocky show we did a couple nights ago with John Raspani.
Yeah, I thought that was really good. A very good episode. I thought Rocky 2 was probably the best Rocky that I've saw. I did, in terms of film, Rocky 1 might have been the best film, like in terms of the actual film. But up until that fight, the fight scene was great in Rocky 1. The actual fight scene, the final scene between Apollo Creed and Rocky Balboa. But the actual film, to me, was more of a film between Rocky's relationship with the name has lost me. Adrian, yeah, that's the one. And his relationship with is it Paulie? Yeah. So that was more about the film. But I thought Rocky 2 was like a 5-star film, and I've seen the ratings. A lot more people really rate Rocky 2, and I thought that was a great film. And it kind of ascended to Rocky 3 as well, which I thought was another great film. But from Rocky 1 to 3, it was kind of like, I don't look at them like personal film, like singular films. It's like a sequel where each one was getting better, like where you get a series where each episode gets better. And I thought the first 3 were great. The fourth one I've seen as well. I thought that was a good film, but I don't think it was as good as the third or second. But I thought it was better than maybe which one was it? I can't remember. I think it was the last one I've seen. And Creed 2, I don't think Creed 2 was very good, but
no, that was a disappointment, especially after the first Creed, because I thought the first Creed was a really good movie.
Yeah, that was a great film. I think they did a pretty good job with, was it Ward, I think, and Tony Bellew was in it as well. And where the sequel was kind of predictable, and it was just about the relationship between, I think, is Michael B. Jordan and his girlfriend. But the actual film, I think after the first, I think it was half an hour, it kind of just become predictable. But the first Creed was good. The last Rocky, was it with Antonio Tarver? I thought that was a good film as well, better than I expected. But I've only watched the first 4 Rockies only recently, so it's kind of good that it was kind of fresh in my memory. And
so what do you think of Rocky 4 with the Russian and Rocky?
I thought it was not bad. I don't think it was. I think the scene, what is it, at the end is kind of it's kind of a lunacy with all the Russians.
Yeah. And Rocky just wants everybody to love each other. When he says
And
love, it just makes me want to smack somebody.
and the actual fight scene as well, I think is a bit. I don't see how someone like Rocky could beat.
Well,
someone
that's not
that
the
big.
problem with me on the fight scene. The problem with the fight scenes for me is how unrealistic they are. Where, Drago will knock him down, and then before Rocky's even gotten all the way up, Drago will knock him down again, and it was just ludicrous.
Yeah, it's surreal.
But I still liked it because it's got a really good soundtrack.
Oh yeah, was he? I can't remember.
See, this is the
Something
thing,
of the
Ahmed.
Hearts.
If you come to the United States and any man you see working out in the gym that is over 50 years old, if you listen to what the music they're listening to while they're working out, it's almost always the soundtracks from the Rocky movies.
Well, the third one was Eye of the Tiger. The first one was with Bill Conti. Was it Flying
Gonna
Higher?
Fly
And
Now, and Rocky 4, you had a bunch of songs in it. You even had Survivor with Burning Heart. There you go.
Yeah, that was the one. Yeah, that was a good song. Yeah.
Yeah, and Vince Nicolo's War. When he's working out and everything. It's scary to how I'm obviously one of those 50-year-old men that listen to that while I'm working out. Huh?
But they were. What's the word? Boxing films. I don't think they were the greatest. What's the word? Boxing films. Because I agreed with a lot of what you guys were saying, and John Responti is more about Rocky's the way the character, how he builds. Like is someone who's an underdog.
Don't you think that's what makes a great movie?
Yeah,
because
that's what makes it.
That's what. Remember John talking about the first time he saw Rocky, how everybody was cheering like it was at the fights. Rocky 2, 3, 4. I went and saw those all the day they came out, and that's what each one of those fight experiences were like for me too. It was just like going to see Cooney Spinks or Holmes Cooney or George Foreman against Evander Holyfield. It was the same feel. I mean, people really believed this character was real.
Yeah, in the sense of that, yeah, I get. At the end of the day, is a film. And normally majority films are either not true, based on not true events. But it's a film. It was a great film. I was just talking about because I've seen some other boxing films as well. I think was the Raging Bull. I thought that was a great film. I think it was Undisputed. I don't think that was the greatest film, but as a boxing film, I thought I enjoyed that because I think someone said it might have been based on Mike Tyson's character. I'm not too sure if that was ever.
See, I think when you go back to Raging Bull was really about Jake LaMotta being an asshole. And a lot of that was his relationship. Oh, the thing that I always heard from anybody that knew Jake LaMotta was that they toned him down and made him seem like a nice guy compared to what he really was, which was not a good person. And the thing about The Raging Bull is it's one of the few great movies you'll watch where you actually hate the lead character and you hate him more as the show goes. And then when he becomes pathetic at the end, it kind of makes you feel better.
Yeah, well, it was one of those things. I actually have the book that the movie is based on
the
on my
much
shelf.
Better too.
I actually like the book better. I mean, because it's more in depth. I mean, it's not that well written. Jake LaMotta. It's Jake LaMotta. In fact, his memory is pretty damn sharp for somebody who took a bunch of punches to the head. But there's a lot of stuff in there where you could just see that there was just a lot of conflict, and I liked it because it's just more close. It's really more. It's more about being a human. You know what I mean? There's this moral gray area that they're delving in. It's not this like superhero shit where it's black and white and, the good guys always win at the end. It's just Jake LaMotta being Jake LaMotta. I mean, I remember he was talking about like how he raped a chick and then he just he didn't even bother with some moral elaboration on what had happened. He was just like, she didn't want it, I took it, what can you do? I mean, that was like some of the stuff that he was saying in the book. I mean, he was talking about how he was in jail and like all sorts of stuff. I mean, I preferred the book over the film.
Yeah, because the film dumbed down what he was.
Well, yeah, and they got some things wrong too. I remember, because he was super jealous of his wife,
Oh yeah,
and I remember there was that part in the film where he punched the guy, but I
Joe
think
Pesci. Is it Joe Pesci?
Yeah, was that his brother in the movie?
Yeah,
yes,
that's his
yes,
Yeah.
brother.
yeah, punched his brother, but hell, I can't remember. But I thought it wasn't his brother who he punched in real life. I don't think. I thought it was his best friend.
Is he his
'Cause,
best friend? It might have been. You might be right,
Yeah,
actually.
I
yeah,
can't remember what
it was
Pesci
one of the
was.
two.
Actually,
Yeah, it
it's
was one of the
not.
two.
It's an all right movie, but I like the Rockies better.
Yeah, it was a cool flick, but yeah, I just preferred the book just because it's more in depth, and it's just more human, I don't know, I liked it a bit better, but it was certainly one of the better boxing films I've seen. Still, I know a lot of people. I've actually seen some of the reviews on the book, and a lot of people aren't that high on it, but I just like how just brutally frank he is about everything that happened in his life.
Yeah, I thought it's more about the character in that, like to get to know. Like I don't know. I've never covered. I never was obviously old enough or even born around about that time when Jake LaMotta was fighting. But even in the last 20, 30 years to even look at much coverage of his fights and career, but it's just a background on how his career went and as a character. Because I thought, was it Robert De Niro did a pretty good job. Yeah, I think he did win an Oscar as well, and how he portrayed him. I think, to me, it came out as he was like a very, very bad person, like an asshole in that fight, but in that film, but the film I thought was good. I do get the Rocky films, which is great. I don't think there'll probably be films like that again with Rocky. Those were just great films. But with boxing, I don't think I haven't seen as many boxing films to say which ones are really that good. But I've seen the one with Will Smith portraying Ali. I thought that was really good as well.
It's because you're young. I thought it sucked.
I don't
Well, I
know.
mean,
It just
seriously,
felt too
I grew up during that time, and it's kind of like Miracle on Ice, the movie they made about the 1980 Olympic hockey team. I didn't like that because they didn't tell me anything I didn't already know. And to tell you the truth, if I want to watch a movie about Muhammad Ali, I would rather see a movie more about him from 1978 to the year he died.
But
To
what
me,
about
that
to
would be more
people?
interesting.
But what? Yeah, I get where you're coming. What about to people who never actually got to see his fights? Like I remember watching
Oh
the
yeah, I think it's
back in
probably. I think
2006.
Will Smith did an outstanding job. I think he did as good as you could to portray Muhammad Ali because
Yeah,
I think
definitely.
probably the two hardest people to be in a movie would be Muhammad Ali and Evil Knievel. No, I'm kidding. Muhammad Ali and Elvis Presley. Evil Knievel would be too, though. But I grew up in the 70s, so Muhammad Ali, Evil Knievel, and then Elvis Presley, you know, those were the three icons at that time. And the thing is, we don't really have icons anymore. We have people that are socially popular, but, you know, Kim Kardashian is not on the level of Muhammad Ali or Elvis Presley.
Yeah, I've heard. I think is it you and is it the Sheridan report? I forget his name. Is it
Oh, yeah,
Bobby?
Bobby Sheridan. Yeah.
I've heard when you go on this day and you've talked about Joe Frazier and Ali. I've actually learned a lot from just listening to you guys. Like I have not watched a lot of these fights, and I think that time is just. I think economically, politically, is just a different time. I think Ali, someone like that is a once in a generation. I don't think we'll probably see someone like that again. But even from a boxing standpoint, it's just is a lot different back then. Now I think is just boxing is not what it was. It's become, I think, a niche sport in America. And
You know, I don't think any sport is what it once was. I
but
think the
boxing,
NFL might be bigger than what it once was, even. But go ahead. Sorry about that.
I was gonna say, but boxing isn't one of the main sports now. Back then, it was like in the UK, you got soccer, and maybe boxing is, if not the top two or top three sport. When in America, there was a time where you had over 100,000 people watching Jack Dempsey. You don't get that anymore now.
No, because you don't have those kind of figures, though. If you had a transcendent figure, you could. But the problem is now, the closest thing you've had to that was Floyd Mayweather. And let's face it, Floyd Mayweather didn't fight some guys that he should have fought. And the thing that makes a transcendent fighter to me is when you get a guy like Sugar Ray Leonard, Marvin Hagler, Tommy Hearns, the guys that I grew up with in the late 70s into the 80s, they were guys that... Let's look at Canelo Alvarez against Danny Jacobs. Alvarez was happy to just do enough to win the fight. When you watch Sugar Ray Leonard, I always bring up like Larry Bonds. Larry Bonds was a lefty, gave him a little bit of problems for some of the fight. Now, easily Leonard could have just coasted, won a 15-round decision, went home. But instead, it got to the 9th round. People weren't happy with his performance. He wasn't happy. He stepped it up, and he went about it out of his way to knock him out. Another one, Sugar Ray Leonard against Wilfred Benitez. They're in the 15th round there. I think it was a relatively close fight. I think it was like 9-6, 10-5. But Leonard could have easily just walked through that 15th round and won the round and won the fight. And instead, against Wilfred Benitez, who was a hell of a fighter, he decided to go out and stop him because he wanted to make a statement. Because I think with guys like Sugar Ray Leonard, the Marvin Haglers, Muhammad Ali, they wanted to be the greatest to ever do this. Floyd Mayweather wanted to make the most money out of anybody else. And I think that the problem is, I think money has kind of replaced more than greatness. I think we live in a society as a whole that's not as competitive as it used to be, which we see that with the person. I mean, I don't ever remember playing a youth sport when I was little and being on a team that wasn't that good, and we got a medal or a trophy. And I just think that I don't think society as a whole is competitive as it once was.
And it's softer.
Yeah, and it's hard to be a transcendent figure because look at it like this. If you look at a Jack Dempsey or a Babe Ruth, you know, Babe Ruth played in New York. If you lived in Florida, you never really saw him. You just heard these stories about this great mythical figure. Jack Dempsey, if you weren't one in 100,000 there to watch him fight Gene Tunney, you might have got to hear it on the radio if your parents had a ton of money and you had one of the first radios. But overall, you were going to read about that fight. And the way those writers wrote back then made these figures mythical. You know, in American football, Red Grange was that way. In the 1920s, people don't know this, but George Halas went out, gave a bunch of money to Red Grange because the NFL was a very, very regionalized niche sport. College football was the main dog. Red Grange was insanely popular. George Halas paid him out the ass, brought him in, and then barnstormed the entire country. And they went from drawing 10,000 a game to selling out Yankee Stadium because he was a transcendent figure. And even though he played at the University of Illinois, everybody around the entire country read the newspapers and what all these great writers who would make, I mean, they would make this bigger than life. Now you get writers that just tell you what happened, that's it. They had you had to set a stage for people back then when you wrote about it. You had to set the scene because people didn't see it. So visually, when you read articles, and Jeremiah, I know you've read a lot of articles and boxing matches from the early 1900s, but when you read those, most of the time, if it was one of these great writers, you could almost, after you read it, close your eyes and picture the fight.
Well, I'll also say that they were generally just better writers. I mean, they really
But
were.
that's why
I mean,
they had to be. People didn't see the game.
Yeah. Well,
that's a good point. Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Well, and the thing too about it, however, is that like somebody like Jack Dempsey, he was kind of doing some of this against the backdrop of World War I. So there was a big setting there to enhance his stature. I mean, nowadays, not only is it a less competitive environment, not only are people softer, in fact, each successive generation gets softer and softer, it gets easier and easier. And, with that, you can just fall back on your parents' money, or you can do so. There's just so many different ways to make money nowadays that these guys don't really grow up in. A lot of these guys don't grow up in abject poverty, and it's not like, I mean, every once in a while you get a Kasim Uma, guys from real hard parts of the world, but a lot of the guys in the West, they're not as tough as they used to be before. And not only that, you'll have guys like LeBron James, who I think is one of the closest things to an icon that you can get. Yeah, I mean, he does film, which helps his stature, and he comments on political topics. But nowadays in America, I mean, some people would lead you to believe that it's a nation of discrimination and stuff like that. But I mean, I can just tell you, being here all my life, it's an easy place to live.
Yeah.
I mean, the discrimination now is nothing like it was even 30 years ago.
Well,
And that is nothing.
The discrimination
30 years
nowadays
before
isn't about race anyways. It's just rich people and poor people. And the rich people make the poor people fight with each other because they think there's a racial problem. I live in Indiana. Not a lot of black people, but I don't hear a lot of people using the N-word. I mean, I just don't. I don't, and the black people that are here, I don't see any problems. I got black people live up the street from me. I mean, I don't care. It's not like you're burning crosses out there, and people got to just realize that politically, I mean, look at the Colin Kaepernick thing. He took a knee because of police brutality, and everybody went nuts. Because
There's a lot of people.
Yeah, nobody can find common ground anymore.
There's a lot of people that actually follow what he was going to say. But I want to put this, because I think this is more related with boxing. Mayweather was a big name, probably one of the last great fighters of our era. I think there's along with a couple of others, but you could argue maybe one of the greatest fighters since Sugar Ray Leonard, but along with Pernell Whitaker maybe. But he was always seen as a villain. I think he played up that role. He fought guys with big fan bases. He kind of built the name on the back end of Oscar De La Hoya's career, who was, I think, probably at that time the biggest box office name or the biggest cash cow in boxing. But he was never really, how do I put it, never really taken to by the American public. A lot of people really didn't like him.
Well,
A lot of people...
How about this? Yeah, go ahead, because I got a point that I'm going to forget.
All right, go ahead. I was just kidding. Oh, sorry. Because I was just going to say, a lot of people didn't take to him, and he was not really a heavyweight, but he still ended up becoming the biggest name in boxing, whatever. But a lot of people did. He was kind of the villain in the game. Is it the antagonist? He portrayed that role, but he was not really... He didn't really have the fan base in America. Now, if you compare that to guys like Ali, Sugar Ray Leonard, they actually had big fan bases and fans who would actually follow him and actually support him. With Mayweather, I don't think outside a diehard, maybe cult or a couple of thousand or some celebrities, he didn't really have that fan base. A lot of people just didn't like the guy, but I think maybe it's a different of times. I think you could maybe answer it better.
Well, I think this. I think that he was a transcendent figure. But the thing about guys like Jack Dempsey, if you remember, Jeremiah knows this, I'm sure he's read a lot about him, but Jack Dempsey was not popular when he first won the title, I don't think, because a lot of people consider him a draft dodger. But by the time you get 1927, 28, everybody liked him. Ali, I mean, he changed his name to Muhammad Ali from Cassius Clay. He was a Muslim. And then he didn't want to fight in Vietnam, and a lot of people hated him. But the general consensus of people, by the time you get to like 1977, 78, most people cheered for him. And the thing is, there's a lot of guys here that start off being the villain, but then people realize how great they are, and they realize that they're not really a villain. The problem with Floyd Mayweather never really made a stand for anything except making money. So he never really made people love him. And Floyd Mayweather, I don't think, was as big a draw as Oscar De La Hoya. I think that Oscar De La Hoya fighting Floyd Mayweather sure helped Floyd Mayweather become the guy that everybody paid to see to fight, though.
Yeah. And I don't blame people like Mayweather in a lot of his fights, like the point you made with Sugar Ray Leonard, that's what I like. I was a fan, but I was also a critic. Like, he would not try and finish guys off. It was the fights with Robert Guerrero, I thought, was kind of the classic example where you got a guy hurt and you're resistant to pull the trigger, where he's getting slapped around, cut open, and you're just backing off. Where if that was Ray Leonard or someone who's like one of the all-time greats from that era, where they would just go and try and stop him. But that was one of my biggest concern, and he wasn't really too fan-friendly. And a lot of the fights I wanted to see, I don't think we got him on even playing field. The fight with Pacquiao, I would have liked to have seen a lot earlier. A fight with maybe Margarito, fights with... I don't know about Paul Williams, if that fight was ever possible, but...
I think it was possible at one point, wasn't it, Jeremiah?
Yeah, it could have been.
Yeah,
I don't know,
didn't
honestly.
want no part of that.
But another thing is, I don't think race is the issue, because you got Deontay Wilder, who's the last or the current heavyweight American champion since I think it was Shannon Briggs, which was over, I think, about 12 or 13 years ago. But I don't think a lot of people put it down to race. I don't think that's the main concern, because in the UK, I know it's a different, but it's still a Western country. One of the biggest names, a guy who's transcended, is Joshua, who is also a black figure, and who's, I think, whose parents are from the same, I think, Nigeria, same part of Africa as Wilder's, I think, family are. But I don't think that's the main thing. I think in America, I don't know if it's just the landscape of boxing and MMA has just overtaken boxing, because to me, it's just now, with HBO out the game, I think boxing has lost a step and is not what it was, like even 10, 12 years ago.
Yeah, well, it's
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a multifaceted problem here. I mean, as we kind of pointed out earlier, boxing is a niche sport here. It's not that popular. And also, being the heavyweight champion of the world really has lost a lot of luster. I mean, there used to be a time in Jack Dempsey's day and Ali's day when it meant that you were the baddest guy on the planet. Now it's just, because boxing is so confusing and everything's become so watered down, it's like, how can you follow along as a casual fan? It's like if I was watching ESPN and they were like, hey, well, Deontay Wilder's the heavyweight champion, and we're hoping he fights the other heavyweight champion in Anthony Joshua.
And then they could fight the other heavyweight champion in Andy Ruiz.
Yeah, or the other heavyweight champion in Tyson Fury. Yeah. I mean, it just it's so damn confusing. And in America, soccer is not a big thing here. So, for us, it's not often that games end in a tie, right? I mean, we're used to having either a winner or a loser, and we're used to having the best play the best. In NFL football, you have the Super Bowl. In baseball, you have the World Series. In basketball, you have the finals, et cetera, et cetera. And so there's a lot of clarity there. But in boxing, when you're like, oh, this guy's the heavyweight champ, that guy's the heavyweight champ, I mean, it's hard as hell to follow along, and that's not good for casual fans because that's who you want to appeal to. On top of that, the thing about there is a racial element to it. There will always be, so long as there's different races. That's always going to exist. But the thing about Deontay Wilder is he's not well spoken.
He's an asshole.
Yeah, he's really not. He's not that interesting. He's from a small market place. There's, because the U.S. is so big. I mean, where you come from counts as well. Like when you're from New York, you typically have more press than if you're from Tuscaloosa, Alabama. So there's a lot of factors at play here, but a lot of it is just Deontay Wilder is not that interesting. And not only that, he's not like Anthony Joshua where, he went to the Olympics, he won a gold medal, because that would help his stock here for sure. I mean, that's part of the reason why Oscar De La Hoya was so popular. But had he won a gold medal, he would be more popular. But it's just, there's a lot of things at play here. And not only that, in America, we're not as hardcore fans. The sporting culture is not the same here as it is in the UK. I mean, guys turning out for Josh Warrington in droves honestly, you would probably never see Americans flock to a featherweight.
He is a little boring, though.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, though, is featherweights don't really sell here. So you'd have to have like you would have to have Carl Frampton, born in New York City, and fighting very good guys for us to even generate somewhat.
When's the last time there was an American featherweight that really had the attention of the general population?
Kenny Russell.
Exactly. I mean, you probably wouldn't. I mean, that's the thing is we're not that big. I mean, we seem to like our heavyweights and guys like that. So you really wouldn't find Americans following a featherweight with that kind of again fervor. It just wouldn't happen. And honestly, because America's so big and there's a lot of regional aspects to it. I mean, you have to understand the geography of America too. You know, it's like in the Southwest, there's a lot of Mexicans. In the Northwest, there's a sizable Asian population. In New York City, pretty much everything exists there. Anything in between, it's a bunch of white people. I mean, you know, in Florida at the tip, there's a lot of Cubans. So a lot of this is pretty regional as well.
You can't compare the two. You can't compare. Yeah, Mike, I was just going to say, you can't compare the two markets, obviously. But a lot of it is also to do with demographic. When I think Michael Montero or someone, I think it was Dougie Fisher as well, has pointed this out with Al Heyman, a lot of his events that he's promoted. I think this is something that happened between Devin Alexander and Tim Bradley. They had a fight and they put it in a place, I think it was Pontiac, Michigan, somewhere. Which wouldn't appeal to either fighters, fans, and
actually, we talked about that fight 2 weeks ago, Jeremiah.
Yeah, something like that. Go ahead,
Alexander, Tim Bradley. That was terrible. Go ahead.
Yeah.
So you get it with Danny Garcia and a lot of the fighters. He's, from Philadelphia, but he's continuously, a lot of these PBC fighters are fighting in, the Barclays Center in New York, where you could try and build a fan base around where these fighters are from. Like guys like Lamont Peterson, who was a big draw in Washington, but a lot of his fights, I remember when he signed with the PBC, were held in New York, which I don't know why you wouldn't be putting a lot more of his fights in Washington, where he was actually a draw. So stuff like that I don't think has helped, but I know you can't compare the two markets, but to me, I think it's clarity as well. With boxing, when you turn around and that decision from Kovalev Ward was announced, like to me, that was like a buzzkill, and like that was a really big fight that I thought was a letdown. Same with you got in Pacquiao Bradley, and I think a lot of these fans, casual fans, might tune into one of these fights. Same with Canelo and Triple G with that 118, 110 card, and might just turn into MMA fans because. But ever since I've actually started watching MMA, you get a lot more clarity and the undercards are full. And you very rarely ever seen a big card or a fight as a casual MMA fan where I've seen a bad decision. So maybe that's also a point, I think, because decisions and robberies don't help. You want to see a clean knockout or a clear, decisive winner.
Yeah, I'll put it like this. We talked about the fight tomorrow night where we got a plus 550 against Andrade. I probably, in the end, would never even consider betting on that because, Selecki's not a big puncher. And probably the only way he gets out of there tomorrow night with a win is if he knocks him out.
Yeah, no, that's certainly an aspect. No, I mean, that's right. I mean, when you talk about a lack of clarity, I mean, it's imagine if you were like my dad. My dad's a pretty casual fan. I mean, he's been following this sport loosely for many, many years now. He was a big Joe Frazier fan, but I mean, it's like if I'm like, hey, Dad, this is going to be a big fight. I bring him to watch, the first Golovkin-Alvarez fight, and he's like, hold on, like he knows who Golovkin is, but he watches the fight. I mean, he called me. I mean, he doesn't watch very many fights, but actually he did watch that fight, and he called me, and he was like, there's no way Canelo won that fight. And I'm like, You know what it is, man. It's boxing. I mean, it just happens far too much. And I've seen a good number of hardcore boxing fans who have made the transition to MMA precisely because of the things that you said. I mean, it's so tiresome not only watching bullshit decision after bullshit decision, but seeing bullshit decisions outside the ring. Like, when Billy Joe Saunders gets to fight Shifa Isufu, who's, barely ranked inside the top 50, fight for a quote unquote world championship. Or when you see, I mean, it's just so political anymore, right? It's like, the WBO, they're in bed with Bob Arum and Frank Warren and all, other European promoters. The WBO is playing footsie with Eddie Hearn and other guys. And, the WBC with Al Heyman. I mean, that sort of stuff can really turn off hardcore fans. And I mean, we've even said on this show that it's tough for us to follow the sport sometimes just because of how deep the bullshit really is. And
too many belts as well.
Too many belts. Too many divisions, too many belts, too many divisions. I mean, I looked at the 105-pound weight class because I'm writing a piece on Ricardo Lopez. There's 183 guys ranked in that division. 183. That's almost half of what there is in 108. I mean, you got to eliminate some of the divisions. You got to make the structure easier to follow. I mean, there are just so many problems with this sport that I think this is part of the reason why we're getting so many pay-per-views is because, these guys demand these big paydays and they got to find a way to give them those big checks. And the only way to do it is pay-per-views. I mean, putting them on network TV is just not giving them the income they want.
Judge Jeremiah, the thing though with the belts is there's one thing to have one belt. I think that era is gone. Like, that's just impossible in this day and age. Have one name, one champion, and just one belt. But when you had 3 belt holders, that was good because when you had a champion, that was just a champion. Then you had a unified champion with 2 if you hold it 2, and then the 3 would make it undisputed. With 4, I think 4 is too many, and now you got the IBO as well, which some people consider as another / recognized belt. I don't think it's a major alphabet belt, but 4 I think is too many.
Quick, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
How can you have more than one world champion?
That's a good question. I mean, the thing though is now is become belts. That's the thing is world belts.
Yeah, but see, the problem is this: the only way they became a problem is because fans bought into this shit. I mean, the only thing they're doing is charging fighters sanctioning fees. They're stealing money from boxers who already have enough money stole from promoters, matchmakers, trainers. I mean, the fact that we talk about it and the fact that we have anybody saying that more than one champion is okay drives me nuts because I don't know of any other sport in the world where you've got more than one world champion. And that's what hurts it. The reason the heavyweight champion being the biggest dude in the world was we don't have a heavyweight champion. So you can't be the biggest guy. And if you get to be the heavyweight champion, then since you can't defend against all 3 mandatories at the same time, and we saw this when other people have won the 4 belts at one time, almost invariably they're stripped the next day from at least one of those titles because they want to keep that cycle of money coming into all these organization committees. And I just find it sickening. And I think without one world champion, this will never go back to being as big as what it was. You could cut it to 2, but there needs to be 1 because the thing is, boxing, at least in this country, before 1940, 1950, boxing was either number 1 or number 2 with baseball. I think it might have been number 1 at that point. From 1950 to 1990, I think it's number 2, maybe 3 once you get into the 80s and 90s when you jump the NFL up there. But I think it is the problem of illegitimate decisions.
Yeah.
Illegitimate world champions. I mean, come on. They're acting like Charlo now is the champion. They just gave him the belt.
That's pathetic. No, don't get me wrong. This is boxing, and it only could happen.
There can't be more than one champion now.
They can't be, and they should only be 1. But this is not athletics or
another sport. I wish it would be like that, where in athletics and in the NFL you'll have one world champion. In athletics as well, you have the one Olympic champion, world champion, and then in a lot of other sports as well. In soccer, when it's the World Cup, when the team wins the World Cup, they are the world champions. But it's got to a point where it's just too many belts. I do think though the lineal or the main, the man who beat the man, or when they say who's arguably the number one champion, the champion, like Canelo right now, to me is the champion at middleweight. Even though Andrade holds a belt, there's not much outside the thin paper belt, title belt that Andrade got that he's really hold any stock. There was a difference. People get mistaken when Joshua and Wilder were meant to fight. Even though Joshua had the more belts, there wasn't a clear number one champion or the number one fighter in that weight class, because in the heavyweight division, if I recall, Fury took about 3 years off, comes back. Then you have Joshua, Wilder, you have 1 and 2, but you don't have a clear number one, even though a lot of people consider Joshua one. Whereas I think that is one thing, but it doesn't help when you got so many world champions, and there should really only be one champion. But I just think that time is gone, and now it's just getting worse. You're getting more champions, you're having interim champions, and that's the bad thing about boxing. But I just don't think it would happen in any other sport, and that's the bad thing. Because even in MMA, you don't get that problem.
Not yet, but you might someday. Because remember, boxing went for a long time and only had one champion until it didn't.
Yeah.
And everything just kind of ran out of control.
Well, and here's the thing is, in my opinion, you need much more than just one world champion to, to sail the ship in the right way. And that's because, one champion is great. I mean, that would add some clarity. But the thing about boxing is it's always, there's still been a Wild West element to it, even when it had one champion per. I mean, after the Walker Law in 1926, which standardized the rounds for championship fights, the Ring magazine was pretty much the place you went to if you want to know who the world champion was. But it didn't always work out. I mean, there were some issues. I mean, like for instance, Midget Walgast fought Black Bill in New York City in one of their tournaments, and they were number one and number two, before that fight. Midget Walgast won, put on a hell of a performance, but the Ring did not recognize him as the world champion because Frankie Gennaro, who was ranked like number 8, I think, was recognized as the champion by, out in California. So you basically had 2 state athletic commissions that were at odds with one another. And so my thing is you need much more than just one world champion. I mean, you also need an independent rankings body, sort of like transnational, so you don't have to rely on too much politics or anything.
You have to fight the best as well. You can't. It can't just be one champion and fighting guys.
Exactly. Well, and that's my problem with the. Right, and that's why I don't live and die by the lineal stuff. I do like the idea of lineal because it harkens back to the good old days, right? And it's got a lot of history and stuff like that. Even guys like Lennox Lewis, are proud to be lineal champions and stuff like that. Obviously, Tyson Fury still runs with it. But my thing is you would have to standardize it. You would have to get it legitimized. You couldn't just have a guy running around as a lineal champion and do like Adonis Stevenson did and defend against whoever the hell he liked to. And no matter what happens, he still wears the title of lineal. In my opinion, you would have to have an independent rankings organization, right? Like transnational. You'd have to have one world champion. You'd have to have less weight classes. And then you'd have to have a governing body or something like that issuing you'd have to have standardized defenses as well. So like every year you have to fight your number 1 guy, and then in your other defense you got to fight like a top 10 guy. And if you take a third fight, you can fight a top 20 guy, sort of like a more showcase, easier fight, right? You just have to standardize those things so we don't have so many questions, so the politics is taken out of it. I'm an optimist. I think it can be done. I mean, I use the example in my article that, like, countries have been reformed in my lifetime. I mean, what was like the United Arab Emirates 40 years ago or 50 years ago or 60 years ago, right? I mean, in my opinion, I think the reform can happen. It's just going to take like some powerful, rich white knight, who actually likes the sport and wants to do well of it, and or something like that.
What about, when you look at the WWE, I think you've brought this up before. Like, I was around just towards the end of the Attitude Era, and I remember Vince McMahon, I think, and I can't remember, I think it might have been Eric Bischoff, but they did a pretty good job where they had Raw and SmackDown. You had one champion on one end, one champion on the other. But if you looked at it, even though it's like HBO Showtime, where you had two rival networks and promoters, if you could call it like that, but it's very simple. You had one champion, and you had only about 4 or 5 belts or something like that. For, I think it was it women's. You had world heavyweight champion, you had a cruiserweight champion, and you had something similar like that. And it wasn't too complicated. Where the pay-per-views were simple. They'd stack up the pay-per-view at each event, each of the month, and the process was a lot simple. Whereas if you compare it to boxing, you got too many belts, you got too many different networks, too many different promoters, and it's very bad when you got one promoter alienated with one, say, company, and then you got one with another, and some of them are not willing to work. It kind of just, what's the word? It separates the sport, and it's not, I think, it's not kind of the fighters as well. They're not really coming together and making the best fight the best, and I still think that's one good thing that MMA and UFC has done, where they've tried. I know it never happened in boxing, but what Dana White has done is trying to make the best in each weight class fight each other and try and get one champion and determine who the best is, whereas boxing is just too fragmented.
Yeah. Well, and funny enough, I mean, Dana White was a big boxing fan back in the day. I mean, he drew his inspiration from boxing. I think he covered boxing in Boston, if I'm not mistaken, before he ever got involved in this. And who knows? I mean, I guess Dana White is in the running to buy PBC, so far as some of the rumors have said. But I mean, I wouldn't mind a league. My only issue with a league is that, right, because I know guys like I can't remember his name right now, but I've heard people toss around the idea like maybe we could do a World Boxing Super Series style league. It wouldn't violate the Ali Act, and you'd rotate you'd rotate the year. So like one year you'd bring together all the best heavyweights, middleweights, featherweights, I don't know, flyweights, and then the next year you'd have the light heavyweights, the welterweights, et cetera, and you just rotate the years. And that way all the promoters could play along and make big money doing so. And I think that's a decent idea too. My only fear with that is that you may have a promoter who doesn't, kind of like you have nowadays, where these promoters don't like each other, and they boycott it, kind of like they do the Olympics. Like, oh well, I'm not putting my fighter in this because these terms are not right. I just don't like the idea of it being fragmented still. I would like a governing body and somebody. Yeah. Again, a lot of people complain about the pay in the UFC, but Dana White has done a hell of a job legitimizing the sport and bringing it a long way. I mean, the first UFC event was 1993 in Denver, Colorado, where I'm from. I mean, it's come a long way since then. I mean, I think boxing needs a figure like him. My only fear is just like the league itself is like, I have heard some complaints about the pay, and I've also heard some complaints about he's not always putting on the best of the best, because they actually went before Congress, and there was some Republican, I think, senator who was grilling the UFC representative, and he was like, hey, are you putting the best versus the best? And the guy was like, well, not, sometimes we do put fights that the fans just want to see. And so the guy's like, okay, well, the best is not getting the best all the time. And he's like, so it's not necessarily a world championship. It's just a belt for whoever's better that night. I think there needs to be some balance there, like where, you have to be able to put on the fights that the fans want, and you have to be able to put the best versus the best as well, even if stylistically it's not appealing. So there's a.
What about? Yeah, I didn't mean to cut you. I was just gonna say, what about see if when the first cruiserweight tournament in the World Boxing Super Series, where you had, I think, all the belts and all the top cruiserweights. See if you could get that in the majority of the main weight classes. If you could get that in the middleweight, light heavyweight, all the popular weight classes, welterweight, heavyweight, it probably will never happen. That'd probably be as close as we could get to that, though.
Yeah, well, if you could even have a governing body and still do that. I mean, the NCAA basketball tournament out here is huge. So I think if you could do that in boxing, you could still have a governing body running the whole thing. And so I think that would be huge for boxing. It would bring in massive betting revenue. It would be exciting. When to expect it. I think that would be great. It's just a matter of finding somebody to actually implement it.
But if you have the WBC, WBA, WBO, IBF all involved, I don't. Would you still really need a governing body?
Well, yeah, I think you would, and it was because my previous point is that with these guys, you never know if they're going to play nice. I mean, you see with Bob Arum bringing a lawsuit on Al Heyman and some of the, Bob Arum talking crap about Eddie Hearn in public. My fear is if you don't have a governing body saying, yes, you have to fight, you might have one of those guys boycott, or you might have an alphabet soup company say, hey, I'm not going to put my belt up for this because of this or that. I mean, I just think you need a governing body to cut out all the fat, because you don't really need the promoters at that point. You don't really need the alphabet soup organizations at that point. To me, that's just added fat. It's just an expenditure you don't need.
All right. I almost fell asleep right there. Wasn't because you were disinteresting. It's because we're almost at 2 hours. But here we go. This is like Final Jeopardy. In UFC 1, because I watched this the other night on YouTube, who was the boxer that fought in UFC 1?
Ken Shamrock? I don't know if he was even.
Yep, there was a boxer, and he lost to Royce Gracie in the first round.
Yeah, didn't he get submitted?
Yeah. Art Jimerson. The interesting thing about Art Jimerson, not that there's that many interesting things about Art Jimerson, but he was, they tried to claim that he was a boxing world champion. And what it was is he'd beaten a guy by the name of Paul McPeak a year or two before that for the International Boxing Council America's light heavyweight title. Now, if I remember right about Jimerson, was early in his career, I think like in 1990, a couple of years before that, he actually got knocked out by Andrew Maynard for the NABF light heavyweight title. And I think in '89, he fought back-to-back Jeff Harding and Dennis Andres. Have you guys seen the Jeff Harding, Dennis Andres fights?
No, I haven't seen him.
Really? I got to post them on the Facebook page. Jeff Hardy, or the Harding-Andres fights were legendary, dude.
Dude, Art Jimison lost. Dude, Art Jimison lied. I just went to his boxer profile. He lost to Brian LaSpada.
Yeah, what's wrong with that? Brian was a guest on our show once, and Brian fought for the Cruiserweight Championship of the world. He fought a lot of dudes. I mean, I think he fought like Adolfo Washington, Vasily Jurov. I mean, he lost, because I looked at his record when I was watching the UFC 1, and I think he lost like 14 of his last 15 fights or something like that. And everybody that was remotely good, he lost to.
Yeah, I just clicked on the link. Yeah, I see that.
Yeah, because it wasn't like the last 14 out of 15, something like that. But he was undefeated for his first 5 fights, though. And then, like, Glenn Kennedy beat him. But Glenn Kennedy beat a lot of really good fighters.
Yeah.
Get that right, Jeremiah.
That's right.
All right, guys. I want to thank Hamed for coming on again. I want to thank everybody for staying up well past their bedtime on a Friday night. You know, when they say nothing good happens after midnight, They're wrong because that was good. All right, Hamed, I want to thank you. You got any final words before we wrap it up?
No, thanks for having me back on. It's good talking boxing with you, and it was worthwhile. I thought we talked about some very good topics.
All right, Jeremiah, anything you want to say before we wrap it up? And real quick, I want to say this so I don't forget after I listen to what you say to wrap it up. But Sunday night, it looks like John Einreinhofer will be back for Inside Boxing Weekly, so make sure you check us out there, where we will recap tomorrow night's fights, and make sure you check us out Sunday night there, Jeremiah.
Yeah, I don't have much. I just wanted to blurt out the result of tonight. I guess Richard Comey stopped Ray Beltran in 8 rounds. Pretty happy about that result. Beltran missed weight. I don't even know if that's the first time he's missed weight, but yeah, I guess he was game in there, but overmatched and ended up getting stopped. No surprise there. So it looks like we might have Richard Comey versus Teofimo Lopez.
Has
All right,
Teofimo got a fight? I was just gonna say.
Yeah, he's fighting some Japanese guy who's undefeated. I've never heard of the fellow. I mean, anything can happen in boxing. I don't always like being sure of myself, but I don't think Bob Arum is gonna. There's just too much money invested in Lopez for him to get a real tough night.
Yeah.
All right, Mike. Thanks for having me.
No doubt. All right, guys, we're going to wrap it up. I want to thank our sponsors, the Retired Boxers Foundation, Alex Ramos, Jackie Richards, and make sure you check them out. Seat Giant, promo code TGT. Of course, betnow.eu, where you use the promo code TRUTH50 to get a 50% cashback bonus on your first deposit up to $1,000. Tomorrow at 2 o'clock, me and Bobby Sheridan will be back with the Sheridan Report. I don't know what the on this day is yet, but 90% of the time, if Hamed listens, he'll tell you it's usually boxing. So if there's a boxing one on there that Bobby puts up, that'll probably be what we're talking about. So make sure you check us out tomorrow at 2 o'clock Eastern Time for the Sheridan Report. And remember, Inside Boxing Weekly will return Sunday night. What time? Did John tell us what time, Jeremiah?
No, I don't think so.
We'll
Probably
just
be
guess. It'll
7.
be 9 o'clock, 8 o'clock, something like that, 7 o'clock, 6 o'clock, rock. That's the song, The Happy Days. All right, guys, we're going to wrap it up. I mean it this time. We are. But you can hear all of our shows on iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you find sports podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. So for Hamed, Jeremiah, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.